Welcome to Peachtree Injury Talk with attorney Jordan Jewkes.
Welcome to Peachtree Injury Talk with Jordan Jewkes. Jordan strives to give injured victims a voice and provide strong advocacy against an often broken system. My name is John Clemens, and today's episode is what happens if you're injured as a passenger. Know your rights. So Jordan, first of all, welcome back.
Yeah, hey, thanks, John. Always good to be here. I appreciate you hosting again.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk to you. I feel like our conversations just fly by, so this should be a lot of fun. Even if it's maybe the subject isn't as fun, but it's important to talk about anyway. So let's talk about it. If someone is injured as a passenger in a car accident, who can they file a claim against?
And that's a fantastic question, and something that happens more and more often, primarily because of the increasing number of rideshare opportunities available out there, Uber, Lyft, and others now. And so passengers, sit in the back seat, sit in the passenger seat, wherever an accident happens, and they're the one person in those cars, or maybe there's multiple passengers, but they're the ones who have no fault. And so potential claims that passengers have can be numerous. I mean, you can obviously bring a claim directly against the other driver that hit your vehicle, but you also have to look closely at the driver of your own vehicle. And that's easy to do when you're in an Uber or a Lyft or some rideshare company. It's a little tougher, though, if your buddy's driving and he caused the wreck or was partially at fault, because then you got to weigh, hey, do I want to bring a claim against my buddy? But yeah, I mean, the passenger is 99.9% of the time completely blameless in the wreck. And so they have their option about who they want to bring a claim against. And frankly, usually what happens is we bring claims against all the above, anyone that was involved in the wreck.
All the above. So when you say bring a claim against, so if I were in a wreck and I were filing a claim against someone, am I filing a claim against that person, or am I filing a claim against their insurance company, or is there a difference?
Yeah, I mean, there's a difference, I would say. I don't know that it's a difference with distinction, but usually before we file a lawsuit, you'd be filing a claim against their insurance company. But the law in Georgia and in most states is when you file a lawsuit, the claim actually names the driver or their employer or whoever gave them authority to drive, the owner of the vehicle. You file suit against the at-fault person or entity. And so the claim then becomes against them when the insurance company at that point comes in to indemnify and defend them. And really the insurance company, if they have enough coverage, is actually who pays out the claim. But yeah, I mean, for all intents and purposes, you're really going against the insurance company. But there are some cases where if the other driver wasn't properly insured or has a lot of assets, then you may actually go after them personally or against the corporation personally.
I see. And so you mentioned something that I think is key. You said we want to go after the driver who's at fault, but sometimes it isn't just one driver. Sometimes they both share fault. So how does that affect, the suit or a claim moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, and many states have some type of system or structure where fault is apportioned or separated or assigned to different parties based on a percentage basis. And, the insurance companies love to deflect fault and to say, well, it wasn't our insured's fault. It was so-and-so, the other driver, or it was, this distraction or something else out there. And so sometimes if you're a passenger and you've been injured because of a car wreck, and you think that the driver of your vehicle may have fault, and you think the driver of the other vehicle obviously has some fault, until everyone agrees that roughly what that percentage of fault is for your driver and the other driver, sometimes you don't have any choice but to file suit. And usually what we say is the jury is the ultimate decider of truth, right? And so sometimes you have both drivers and their insurance company saying, well, it wasn't our fault at all, it was the other fault. And so if both people are saying that, and no one's willing to pay, you've got to file a lawsuit to put it in front of a jury to figure out who's going to pay. But generally speaking, those things tend to work out. And as the evidence and the truth is unfolded through the investigation and through the legal process, it starts to become more clear whose percentage of fault it is. And we've had a lot of cases where they just agreed it was 50-50 fault, after some work on the case and some time. And so, they paid out, a whatever we felt was the fair value of the claim, just in a 50-50 percentage each side. So
And is that,
it can get tricky.
yeah, I can get tricky, I'm sure. Is in a situation like that, is it more because both parties don't want to continue the mounting legal fees and everything, or could it just,
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly a part of it. And sometimes we get like camera footage that shows clearly who's at fault, or sometimes you start to realize that the statements from one of the parties is really inconsistent and not helpful to what they want you to believe. And you can start to smell that something's not right here. And sometimes the insurance companies are really good at smelling that and recognizing, hey, a jury may not find our insured or our driver is credible. And so the insurance company starts to feel more pressure. So much of what we do comes down to credibility. And if one of the drivers starts to have cracks in their credible foundation, then usually that means that the insurance company is going to pay. But sometimes they fight it and want a jury to decide all of that.
Got it. So I do have a question. Again, this is me, not a lawyer, so I'm glad that I have a lawyer to ask this question to.
Yeah, absolutely.
Trying to figure out what's true and what is just true on TV, right?
Yeah.
So when I think about suing someone, I think about the lady from McDonald's. She sued because she had coffee in her lap and sued for, I don't know, $1 billion or whatever it was.
Yeah.
So in this kind of a scenario, let's say I get, there's a company truck that hits me, sideswipes me in my car, and I say, hey, that company's got deep pockets. I want to sue him for $10 million for pain and suffering. Like, is that something I can actually do, or are there actually like limitations on the kinds of things I can claim, like in an accident?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. And you bring up the McDonald's case because it's an example of a very good example of the common public misconception, or really just the perception, that lawyers are out there trying to win a huge amount of money on every single case. And there are certainly folks out there that if they get hit by a tractor trailer truck and they recognize deep pockets, they try and go after every penny they can. But I would never fault someone for trying to go after what the law legally allows them to and what they're entitled to get. And what I mean by that is the law in Georgia and every other state says, hey, you should be compensated for your medical bills, for your pain and suffering, for your future medical bills, for your future pain and suffering, for your lost wages. The question is, what's the fair value of that compensation? And so we put that to a jury. The insurance company and the other driver has their attorneys to defend it. And you should have a good plaintiff's attorney to prosecute or bring those claims. And so really, if there is a verdict that you hear of that's large, or that it's $1 million or $2 or $5 or $10 million or $100 million, remember, there had to have been jury members who agreed to award that based on the evidence that they were presented with at trial and the arguments in front of the juries. And also the judge had to have signed off on that. And so it's a common misconception that there are these runaway juries giving out nuclear amounts of money, these massive verdicts, but almost always there's some really damning facts against the bad actor in that. I don't want to get too off script, but too off pace here, but in that McDonald's case, that was sort of the poster child of this sort of effort to reform the laws against, old ladies who were trying to make a buck off of McDonald's. But if you kind of look at that case, there was a really interesting story, this McDonald's hot coffee case, because McDonald's had heated that hot coffee up to a very, very high level, and they knew that people were getting burned from this. And so the jury in that case, first of all, she got burned so bad that beneath her clothes, she had to have skin grafts, right? And this was coffee that she was supposed to be drinking, from the cup, directly. And so, but she spilled it on her lap, and her burns were just tremendous. I mean, like, had to go to the hospital, loss of use of some of the functions of her body and things, and just really terrible pictures. And so the jury, though, was presented evidence by this lady's attorneys that McDonald's had known for a long time that they were handing out too hot coffees. In other words, that the coffees that they were handing out were beyond scalding. They were incredibly hot, and they were ignoring it, and they kept doing it. And so a big part of that hot coffee verdict, so that reward, was the jury members saying, we need to somehow send a message to McDonald's that they can no longer continue to burn innocent people by giving them scalding hot water in these little coffee cups that tend to spill when being given. So anyway, usually I guess I say all that, John, to say usually when there's a big, massive verdict out there, it's because the trucking company was ignoring significant safety measures or safety rules and acting in sort of a wanton or acting with impunity. They were just doing it, without regard for the safety of others. That's 99% of the time what's behind those big verdicts.
Yeah, no, that's actually really good information to know, because again, as a non-lawyer, like I can only rely on what I see in the headlines, and sometimes the headlines aren't always 100% true.
Oh, so. Yeah. I mean, that goes both ways. Like, hey, there was a massive award for this, but sometimes, there's the jury says, hey, we don't believe this. And it's because, they saw through the lack of credibility of the person who was claiming to be injured. So anyway, but you're exactly right.
Yeah. All right. So I'm not going to win the jackpot if I get hit by a car. So I've come to peace with that now.
Yeah.
But let's say that I'm in a car and I'm in an accident, and the other person who's at fault didn't have insurance or didn't have enough insurance. Now what happens? What do I do now?
Yeah, and unfortunately that happens very often. And in Georgia, the minimum amount of insurance is $25,000 to be a legal driver. In other states, it's less. I want to say in Florida, I think it's $15,000. And some states, there's just, you don't even have to tell them. And so you almost have to assume that whoever hit you doesn't have enough insurance to potentially cover your injuries. And so the first thing every single person can do who hears this podcast or has ever been in a wreck before, the first thing you can do is go buy what's called uninsured motorist coverage, which is coverage you can buy to attach to your vehicle and your ability to drive. It attaches to you that says, hey, in the event that someone hits me, I have coverage on top of whatever they had or they didn't have, is maybe the better way to say it, so that if I get injured, there's some insurance available to me, even if it's my own insurance, that will cover for my medical bills, my pain and suffering, any disability I may incur, or permanent injuries to cover me. So that's the best thing you do, is buy your own uninsured or underinsured motorist coverage. And every insurance company offers it. And it's frankly, John, it's not that expensive. It's much cheaper than just buying the legal limit of insurance. It's just a couple dollars more a month to buy uninsured motorist coverage.
Yeah.
So
I
was going to say that would be the very first thing I would do if you're worried about that. And it happens all the time. People don't have insurance.
Yeah. And in fact, you bring that up. I have that on my car insurance, and you're right. It's just not that much money. Now, having a 16-year-old driver, that is a lot of money. But the uninsured motorist
that's a whole nother thing. And that's the other thing, though. I mean, John, if you've got a 16-year-old driver, there's a bunch of other 16-year-old drivers out on the streets who may not have insurance, and their parents may have said, hey, here's the keys. You drive the car and buy your own insurance while you're at it. And they're like, oh, I'm working at McDonald's. I can't afford that. So.
Yeah, no, I hear you. And so the last question for today. Sometimes it happens where you get in an accident and the other party, and maybe you think to yourself, do I really want to bring a claim against this guy? Like, he's my buddy, I go to the bar with him or whatever. So what's your advice to someone who's nervous about filing a claim against someone they know, whether they're the passenger or, just another party in the wreck?
Yeah, I mean, that can be one of the toughest sort of decisions you have to make if you're in that position. And because without doubt, any attorney that tells you that doesn't affect the relationship between you and your buddy, or you and your friend, or who, maybe it's a distant relative or an aunt and uncle or something, anyone that tells you that they're just going to say, hey, yeah, go ahead and sue me or bring a claim against me, that's going to affect the relationship. So maybe my best advice is, don't hang out with or become relatives to people cause wrecks, but I know that's not very practical. But yeah, I mean, what we've seen very often is, your buddy, is driving you home and makes a bad driving decision and goes off the road or hits a tree or something, and hopefully you're wearing your seatbelt and your injuries aren't that severe, but suddenly you're not sleeping and you've got a neck injury and it's just purely your friend's fault. I think most people who are reasonable understand that if they genuinely caused injury, to their friend, someone they cared about, or their family member, they're going to say, hey, look, this is why I have insurance. Do what you need to do. Right. And that's actually most of the time when that happens, it's people are saying, hey, I get it. That's why I purchased insurance. I'm sorry I injured you. Here's the policy information and do what you need to do. It gets tougher when you have to file a lawsuit and then like depositions happen or something like that because their insurance doesn't want to pay or doesn't want to pay fair value. So those are tough conversations to have, John. But unfortunately that happens sometimes. But just don't get in the car if you think the driver is drunk, and to avoid that situation very often, or don't go and get in a vehicle with someone speeds or drives recklessly, and you're going to really probably minimize the chances of that happening.
Yeah, absolutely. So Jordan, again, it's just, every time I talk to you, I feel like we just get started and it's time to stop. But anyway, thanks so much for coming and just sharing of your wisdom and just having a good conversation today.
Yeah, and hopefully some of this information is helpful to folks, and they can always subscribe and get more information and watch all the videos.
Absolutely. And so if you're listening out there, thank you for joining us on Peachtree Injury Talk with Jordan Jewkes. If you want to connect with Jordan and his team, visit jewkesfirm.com. And as Jordan mentioned, be sure to like, subscribe, leave a review so we can get this show out to more people and help more people out. Until next time, hope you have a great day.
Thanks, Sean.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.